and welcome to yet another Facemaker video tutorial. I am Nuno, and today we're gonna talk about animating your watch face. Yes, Facemaker has a few tools that allow you to grab a simple image widget and turn it into an animation by either moving it across the screen or rotating or changing the opacity or even scale it. Okay, so I know I talked about in other videos that you can import your own animation or even generate one from particles, just like this. Let me show you. So by pressing, no, not this, so let's add a frame by frame and press generate. So this is the simple animation generator from Facemaker, and you can create interesting things like, you know, using particles. But there are times where you need more simple animations, like for example a heart beating next to the heart rate value, for example. And this is very easy to create using a set of tools that Facemaker has. So for that you must have a simple image widget right here, okay? And here I am going to load a heart image from the library. So let's go into the stencils and select a heart image, this one for example, and let's make it red, shall we? So let's go into the fill color effect, change the color to red, maybe a little bit darker. Yeah, something like this will work. Let me just remove the guidelines for now, and let's apply the fill color effect. Then let's go back into the properties and scale this down just a little bit, just like that, and apply the transformation. So right now this is really 41 by 39 pixels, okay? Here on the widget I'm gonna add a container and and set the heart rate data type, and then we'll add an image combo. Select heart rate and press generate. So right now I have created a heart rate image combo that shows the current heart rate, but right next to it we have an image of a heart, and this is where the animation generator comes into the scene. So what we can do here is maybe animate it and make it look like it's beating or you know, throbbing. And yeah, for that I am going to first change the color of this image combo to something like white. Yeah, this will work. Now let's go back into the image. So I said that we could make it look like it's beating, and there's a lot of ways you can do that. So if you notice here on the background, any image widget will have this tab here called animations. So let's click it, and here you can add actions. So what are actions? They're basically steps of your animation. So imagine you have an image widget that's located on the left of your watch face, and then you want it to move to the right. So for that you would add a new initial state. This is the first action. So this is the action that marks where the widget will start its animation, okay? And here, if you move it, you'll see that the coordinates here on the right side are moving too. So yeah, right now I'll set it here, and then I'll add a new action and move it to the right, just like that, okay? And you can see that we have different values on the X and the Y, or at least the X coordinate. This is because we moved it and Facemaker detected that the action is selected and updated the X coordinates so you don't have to make it by changing these input values. And then we'll make it go back into the initial place. So for that, we'll add a new action, and then move it more or less to the place where it should be. But we know that the initial state is 13, so it's in the same place exactly. Now let's set it to loop and press preview. Now you see what Facemaker did. So basically these are actions, and you defined an initial state by saying that you want it to be on 13 by 219, and then you told Facemaker that you wanted to move to 408 on the X coordinate and take 1 second. And by the way, all these values here are milliseconds, and since you have 1000 here and 1000 here, the total will be 2000 milliseconds, which adds up to 2 seconds, okay? And taking into consideration that it's 25 frames per second, it will be 50 frames in the end. So nowadays with modern smartwatches, 50 frames is as far as you can go. I mean, you can have more frames, but starting from 50 or more, the watch may start behaving strangely because the animation is too big, and when processing 30, 40 or 50 widgets, there might be a lag. So take that into consideration and be conservative with the number of frames of your final animation. This will also be or can be optimized after you convert this set of actions into a real animation. So let me show you here. So now that I've shown you the principles of the actions, I am going to delete these actions here, put it back to the initial state right there, okay? And now we want to make it look like it's pulsating. So I'm going to enable the guidelines and try to align these widgets better, just like that, okay? Now let's go back into the and by the way, you'll notice that this image combo has some white space around the numbers. And for that, we can solve it very quickly by simply doing crop to content. Just like that, okay? And now when you try to center it, it will be better centered because it doesn't have that white space around, okay? So let's go back into the image and try to make it pulsate. And for that, I'm going into the Animations tab and press New. Okay, here we're gonna change the opacity setting. So let's click it, and the initial state will be 100% opacity, okay? So totally opaque. And now let's add a new action, and on this one, I'm gonna set the opacity to 10. Oops, sorry, 10. This might be too much, so let's increase it, let's say 25. Okay, so 25, and you're saying that you want the opacity to go from 100 to 25%, taking 1 second. This might be too much, so let's change it back to 300 milliseconds, which is almost a third of a second. And now let's add a new action, and on this one, let's set the timer to 300, and then take the opacity up to 100%, just like that, okay? So what we're saying is that we wanted to start with 100 opacity, take 300 milliseconds to go to 25% opacity, and then more 300 milliseconds to go back to 100 opacity, okay? So let's press play. Now you see what we have here. So this will work very well to give some, some dynamics to your watch face, and it will look completely different in the end. This might not be your taste, but many people prefer to have this kind of accents on their watch faces, and using this method here, the animations tab, allows you to do just that. So right now we have a problem, is that this is a simple animation, or rather a simple image. And this is not an animation, this is a preview using actions that were staged by you. And to be able to use them on your watch face, you have to convert to animation. And let me show you here. If you press export, Facemaker will tell you that there's an image with animations or actions applied that aren't converted. So you first have to convert to animation, okay, by pressing this button and pressing yes. So right now, Facemaker is analyzing all the actions and creating all the necessary images to create that animation. And in the end, it will turn this image widget into a frame-by-frame widget with all the frames necessary to create the animation on the watch. So it's almost done. I'm working to make this process even faster because it really depends on your computer's CPU. But yeah, I think 1 minute or so isn't too much. And there we go, we have the 16 frames that Facemaker said it would create. And if we go into the frame manager here, you'll see that we have the animation exactly as we created it. And if we now press preview, there you go. Now if we press export, Facemaker will let you export the watch face, because this is now an animation, a real animation that you created all by yourself on Facemaker. How great is that? So you can do more complex stuff, and let me show you here. So let's delete these and delete this heart animation we created. And now I'll make a more complex situation where we're gonna make a rectangle move using, or rather rotate, using the pivot placement. Okay, so for that I'm going to create a rectangle with 10 by 100 pixels, okay, and place it here. And now let's go into the animations tab and press new. Immediately, if you enable the rotation property here, you'll notice that now we have a pivot located here in the exact center of the image. Okay, so the image is 10 by 100 and the pivot is located on 5 by 50. Okay, so what I want to do now is set the pivot to the bottom side of the widget. So we know it's 100 height, so let's set it. Oh, this is the rotation, sorry. The initial state of the degrees of rotation. So what I want to do is change the pivot here. So set it to 100, okay? And you'll see that the pivot has moved into the bottom side of the widget. And this is what we want. Okay, so the pivot is set on the initial state. And we said we want the pivot to be on the bottom side of the widget. And now let's add a new action. Enable the rotation, and you'll notice that all the settings from the last action will be here. Okay, you don't have to set the pivot to 100 again, because Facemaker knows you must maintain it, or at least you should. And now let's rotate it by 90. There we go. And let's make this smaller, this value smaller, something like 250. Just like that, okay? And now let's add a new action, and let's bring it back into 0 rotation. Just like that, and set the timer to 250. And if we set the animation to loop and press preview, you see what we have here. So now let's say that you wanted to, once it gets to the top, it rotates back. You want it to rotate up using the rotation pivot here on the top. So this is very simple. All you have to do is add a new action, okay, and set the timer to 0. So the change will be instantaneous, okay. So let's change the rotation property and change the rotation pivot to 0. Now you'll see that the rotation pivot came all the way to the top, and now it's set here. And we changed it in 0 milliseconds, so the change will be instantaneous, okay? So now let's add a new action, and now since the pivot is located on the 0 y coordinate, we can now rotate it -90, just like that, and set the timer to 250, and finally add a new action and rotate it back to 0 and set the timer to 250. Now let's press preview and see what we have here. Now you see, now you learned how to change the rotation pivot, and since each and every one of these properties is a mutable property, something you can change over time, to change the pivot you must add a action specially for it. So here we defined that we want the pivot to change from 100 on the y coordinate back into 0 pixels, okay, so located on top, and then all the actions you had after this change will respect that pivot change, that pivot location, okay. So this is how you do more complex animations, and what we did here is rotation, and we can now stop the preview and set it to or start converting to animation. So you can see the possibilities here. You can create a lot of things like moving stuff around the watch face and do it solely using Facemaker, and for that you only need a simple image widget that you can import or create yourself, just like I did with this image here, and then give it actions and make it move or scale or change opacity, like I've shown you with the heart image pulsating. The next property I'll be covering is the scale. So the scale is a little bit different, because right now all scales should be done from the center. And I'll show you maybe a propeller or a saw, a circular saw, moving throughout the screen. And this one is converted. And there we go. And if we press play, you'll see that we have the animation exactly as we created. And it will take 28 frames, and this should work perfectly well in just about any watch you try it. From GT2 onward, Huawei supports animation, so you can do this for GT2, GT3, Watch 3, Watch 4, and every other, like Watch Buds, and all the others, all the other watches that came after GT1. GT1 does not support animation, so it only uses the normal build mode, which doesn't have animations, okay? So keep that in mind. For a MacFit, it's different. All the watches from a MacFit support animations straight from GTR1, okay? So you can do this on a MacFit for all watches, and for Huawei from GT2 onwards, okay? So right now I'm going to try the translation and scale. So here on the library, I'm going to load a saw, a circular saw element or image, this one for example, and let's make it smaller, something like 100, and put it there. Okay, so let's apply the transformation, and the image now is really 100 by 100. And now let's go into the animations tab and press new, and this will set the start position and scale and all the other properties you can set. So here I will set the scale to 100 by 100%, okay, and the translation to its initial state. Now let's add a new animation or animation action, and then let's move it to the right, just like this. Okay, and here I will change the scale to 50%. And now you see that it's scaling from the center. You have no way to set a pivot like you have for rotation. Okay, so keep that in mind. And okay, this one is done. Let's set it to 300, and then add a new action and enable the translation property and the scale. So we'll move it back to where it was initially, and we'll set the scale back to 100. There you go. And now let's compare the placement, and we can see that it's perfect. So let's set it to loop by clicking this button here and press play. So you'll see that initially it moves much faster because we've set the timer for 300 and here to 1000. So let's set it to 300 here too. Now you can see that Facemaker is animating the scale along with the position of this saw, and then scaling it back to 100. Let me make this slower by changing this to 1000, just like that, so you can see better what's happening. So yeah, it's scaling and moving to the right. Then it gets back to the initial place and scaling it back to 100%. Okay, and yeah, if we now apply this modification, this animation, I'm going to set this back to 300 because it has an impact on the number of frames and the duration. Or maybe we can increase it just a little bit. Let's set it to half a second. And 25 frames, yeah, that's good. So let's press convert to animation. And yeah, we're almost at the end of this video, and you learned that you can create these animations by staging actions and change the height, the width, the scale, so the opacity, and the rotation of an image widget. Okay, and then Facemaker will stage those actions and record the frames for you, creating a frame-by-frame widget. Or in the case of the Watch series from Huawei, create a GIF animation. So we're almost done. And let's wait just a little bit more. I know I should fast forward these parts, but yeah, it's almost done. It doesn't take that long. And 92, 96, and there we go. If we press play now, you can see that the animation is working perfectly. We could have even make it rotate, you know, or add a propeller and make it rotate. And let's do that real quick. So let's add an image, and this will be our last one. Let me open a here. Let me open a Google page and search for propeller image. Oops. So propeller image. And let's get a propeller image from the internet, and let me see one that would fit here. Yeah, this one. So let's copy image, and then on Facemaker you just have to click this image preview and press Ctrl V. And there we go. You have the image imported straight away from the internet, and we should make it smaller. So let's go with a 100, maybe more, 200. Yeah, that's perfect. And apply the transformation. And now remember, you should apply transformations whenever you go and play with the animation actions here, because you need to have all transformations applied before you start adding actions. Keep that in mind. So initial state, let's set the rotation with the rotation pivot, set this 100 to 100 and 0 rotation, and then one new action, and here we'll set it to rotate 360, and it will take 1 second. So let's press preview. So right now it's not set to loop, but you can change that here and press play. So there we go. Now we have a nice little propeller image rotating, and we can now convert it to animation. And this shouldn't take long, so you can see the possibilities here. You can, you know, give some dynamics to your watch face and turn it into something more interesting instead of having a dull watch face without any movement. Some people prefer it that way. I prefer to have some aspects, some, you know, some small animations to give it some life, some new life into the watch face. And yeah, you can easily do it using this method in Facemaker, which I think is very powerful, and you can create quite interesting things by simply grabbing a static image and, you know, animate it and make something more special with it. So yeah, we're almost done. This animation is converted, and now in the end you'll notice that we have a lot of empty pixels around the animation. What you can do is come in here and press crop to content, and we just wait a little bit. Oh, maybe I didn't press it correctly. Well, it's not working. I am not sure why. Let's reselect. Oh, I see what's happening. It has some, you'll notice on the lower part here, it has some pixels that weren't really transparent. So Facemaker is not able to cut the image more. So we'll have to go with this. There we go. We have a animation created on Facemaker using a propeller that we gave rotation. So you see those pixels there that weren't letting Facemaker cut the image to the propeller. And so yeah, this is animate your watch face using Facemaker. I hope you liked it, and I hope to see you on the next video. Bye!